On May 9th, 1955, 70 years ago today, Jim Henson's first ever television series Sam and Friends premiered on NBC. The show is a 5-minute interstitial series airing in Washington, D.C. before programming on NBC. For the most part, the show consisted of Jim's puppet characters lip-syncing to pre-recorded songs, but it was also the debut of the most iconic puppet character in the world, Kermit the Frog. Most Sam and Friends material is rather elusive to the public due to its age, and none of the characters really quite took off, but since the series' end, Jim Henson continued to use Kermit on television appearances, with him later using the character on Sesame Street and The Muppet Show, where Kermit really started to take off. I knew that I wanted to do a video celebrating Kermit's anniversary, but I wasn't really sure how I wanted to do it. I pretty much just talk now about Kermit's history, and in projects like The Muppet Movie and in Song on Sesame Street, we've seen Kermit talk about his rise to stardom. Even at his own home video, The Best of Kermit on Sesame Street. From time to time on this podcast, especially when it comes to the Muppets, I really like the deep cuts, so I decided to honor our favorite frog by looking back on his childhood with the home video special Kermit's Swamp Years. From 2002, this special takes us back in time to before Kermit went into show business. So as the opening credits start, I really like how they're actually crediting the Muppet performers by name. And saving the big star for last, of course, Steve Whitmire as Kermit the Frog. Anyway, as our story starts and we pan around to the swamp, we meet a CGI character named Horace D. Fly, who gets caught by his old friend Kermit on his way home to the swamp where he grew up. While Kermit's on the road, he recalls the first time he and his friends ever left the swamp, remembering it being the biggest adventure of our lives, as we head back in time to a young Kermit with his friends Goggles and Croaker, who all have now grown out of their tails, but are tired of being treated like tadpoles by adults, which I figure is the equivalent of being treated like children. But really, they're just having fun being young frogs jumping into the swamp off of a rope. But Goggles, being a toad, is a bit hesitant about being in water, and once he goes in, he starts dramatically drowning until Kermit points out that the water is only 3 inches deep. Goggles reminds me of Rex from Toy Story. They both have high-pitched voices and get scared so easily. Croaker is the next to jump, but he doesn't come up to the surface right away. Goggles points out that frogs can't drown, but he and Kermit get worried before Croaker pops up behind them. While hanging around later that day, Kermit wonders about what happens outside of the swamp. Goggles has never wondered about it, but asks Kermit and Croaker, "Am I abnormal?" Croaker answers, yes, and sides with Kermit, who claims that from outside the swamp, he feels like he can hear voices calling his name. Kermit! Who's Herman? Croaker encourages Kermit to listen to the voices he hears as he prepares to lead Kermit and Goggles to join him outside the swamp. Meanwhile, a scientist named Hugo Crassman is traveling down the swamp in a boat with his assistant Mary rowing. Hugo's calling, "Row! Row!" kind of like Olympic paddlers. Hugo has Mary stop for him to look around as he states that he feels as though he belongs in the swamp. Waiting for the sunrise, matching wits with nature, and Mary adds, wearing rubber pants? After a minute, Hugo has Mary row further ahead to the direction of where the frogs would be, while Goggles and Kermit try to stop Croaker from leaving the swamp. "I don't want to know what's out there! I'm not even comfortable with what's in here!" Croaker insists that everything will be fine no matter how hard Goggles and Kermit persist, but neither one of them plans to give up as the pair follows Croaker outside of the swamp. Kermit decides to go along with Croaker, but Goggles is too nervous. However, arguing about it captures the attention of Mary and Hugo. Or should I say Dr. Crassman. Mary calls him Mr. Crassman and he corrects her, "That's Dr. Crassman." One of those guys, huh? I do wonder though if he's related to Professor Crassman from the Muppet Movie. Not only because of the last name, but they're both scientists who in both movies were portrayed as antagonists, and they both were obsessed with frogs. Anyway, as Kermit and Goggles continue arguing, Dr. Crassman and Mary finally find them, but the frogs manage to get out of the way, but Croaker accidentally steps on Goggles' poison gland and he runs off to dip his foot in the water. But they get noticed by Dr. Crassman as he goes after them, only for the frogs to be cornered immediately. However, he and Mary get scared off immediately by the group's friend Arnie the alligator, also from the Muppet Movie. With the humans gone, Arnie asks the frogs and the toad, I keep forgetting that Goggles is a toad, why they were at the edge of the swamp. The group comes up with excuses, but none that Arnie believes, and Kermit fesses up about their curiosity. Arnie warns them about the dangers outside of the swamp, such as shiny-wheeled beasts and rubber pant-wearing human beings. Well, they already came across one of those. Croaker claims that if Arnie hadn't come along, Croaker would have scared the humans away himself, but Arnie warns them not to talk to humans, claiming that they are likely to become food that way. Kermit thinks about Arnie's advice, but Croaker believes that he was trying to scare them. Well, he did a very good job! We also learn a bit about Kermit's family in this special. Kermit's mother calls him to set the dinner table for his brothers and sisters as he gets trampled by them when he yells that dinner is ready, and they do the same for bath time and bedtime. And I did pause the frame because I wanted to count how many siblings Kermit has. It looks like 12. It's quite the big family. Before bed, Kermit sings to himself while stargazing before hearing his name, at first believing that it's coming from the stars, but it's actually his mother pointing out how late it is. Kermit reminds his mother about something she had told him before, how there's a star up there with Kermit's name on it, asking what would happen if he weren't able to reach it. Kermit's mom assures him that he'll manage to reach any star in such a big swamp before telling him it's bedtime. The next day, Kermit, Croaker, and Goggles reconvene, and Goggles tells the gang that he had nightmares about being in the human world, including being dipped in breadcrumbs and eggs, which he found to be quite soothing on my buttocks. Croaker insists that nothing scares him until he bumps into Blotch, a tough-looking bullfrog. The gang trades insults with Blotch, and Blotch prepares to attack, but when Kermit shouts, "Duck!" Blotch looks around claiming not to see a duck when he realizes that the trio already took off. Blotch catches up to the gang and he punches Goggles into the air. "I can see my house from here!" The gang escapes Blotch and makes it outside of the swamp, but not before Blotch finds them and beats Goggles all the way into the road. Kermit and Croaker notice a shiny wheeled beast that Arnie warned them about, also known as a truck. The truck stops and the driver Wilson takes Goggles and Blotch and puts them in a box in the back of the truck. Kermit hangs onto the truck to try and stop it, but it drives off. Croaker tries to stop the truck by posing intimidatingly, but the wheel runs him over, although he does survive. "My entire life passed before my eyes, and boy, do I got some issues." Kermit feels responsible for Goggles and Blotch being kidnapped as he heads off to bring them back until Croaker reminds him of what Arnie told them humans do, figuring it would be better to tell their parents about what happened. But then Kermit decides to find Goggles and Blotch and bring them back to the swamp, with Croaker tagging along, but they aren't sure where to go. Croaker offers to jump into the air, thinking that he might be able to find the truck from higher up, but due to the truck accident, he isn't able to hop. But Kermit notices that the tire track on Croaker's chest matches the ones on the road, using them as a way to find Goggles and Blotch, who arrive at Wilson's pet shop and are put in a tank with other frogs, while Wilson goes outside to give a squeaky toy to a customer's dog. One of the frogs, Roy, welcomes the pair to the pet store, but Blotch immediately starts yelling at the other frogs, demanding to be let out, making threats at Roy every time he talks to him. Goggles calls Blotch a bully, angering Blotch, who tries to attack, but Goggles keeps running off, with a pair of turtles commenting on Goggles and Blotch fighting in a very Statler and Waldorf-like way. Meanwhile, Kermit and Croaker continue their journey, but find themselves exhausted by how long they've been walking. Back at the pet shop, after witnessing Blotch and Goggles fighting, Wilson takes them to another space, sharing it with a snake. Back on the road, Dr. Craftsman is disappointed not to have found any frogs, with Mary suggesting calling the pet store. Dr. Craftsman is flabbergasted by this idea, stating, "In all my years of science, I've never had to pay for it." Yeah, I won't spoil anything, but given what we learn about Dr. Craftsman later in the movie, I don't really believe that. Mary offers to loan the money to Dr. Craftsman, but then he spots Croaker and Kermit and demands that Mary stop the car. Hearing Dr. Craftsman wakes Croaker and Kermit up before he gets scared away by a dog as he and Mary head off. Having never seen a dog before, Kermit and Croaker are intimidated as Kermit tries to fight it off with a stick, but the dog thinks that Kermit wants to play fetch and insists that Kermit throw the stick. Not sure of what else to do, Kermit throws the stick and the dog goes after it, bringing it back to Kermit and introducing herself as Pilgrim. Before Kermit and Croaker leave, Pilgrim asks if she can be their dog. Kermit and Croaker claim not to need a dog, but then Pilgrim explains to the pair that she was abandoned by her owner. When Kermit and Croaker explain that they're trying to find their friends, Pilgrim offers to help out, and finally, the pair allows her to tag along. Kermit and Croaker tell Pilgrim about what happened, including the part about the shiny wheeled red beast, with Croaker pointing out the tire tracks on his chest. Pilgrim sniffs the markings and tells the pair that they have to find a truck, with Pilgrim going into even greater detail and the pair follows her. At the pet shop, the snake wraps herself around Blotch, much to his disturbance, and introduces herself as Vicky. Goggles demands that Vicky let Blotch go, offering himself to her instead, using his glands to get her to leave them alone. Blotch thanks Goggles for saving him, with Goggles claiming to be helping a friend, as Blotch starts to lighten up. Pilgrim leads Kermit and Croaker to a barn where Kermit gets chased by a pig. Kermit says, "I hope I never see one of those in my entire life," as the pig warms up to Kermit. And so it begins. Meanwhile, Blotch tries to lift the cover of the frog tank up so he and Goggles can escape, but after successfully doing so, a rabbit named Jack, Jack Rabbit. Anyway, a rabbit named Jack tries to talk them into staying, singing about the joys of being a pet with the other animals joining in. This convinces Goggles to stay, but Blotch states that frogs belong in the swamp. Goggles, however, is a toad and invites Blotch to join him. Blotch has mixed feelings about it, but decides to stay regardless. Pilgrim manages to lead Kermit and Croaker to Leland, a nod to Jim Henson's hometown in Mississippi, and Kermit instantly spots Wilson's truck. Pilgrim races off after it, with Kermit and Croaker following behind, but Kermit trips while Croaker keeps going. A young boy offers to help Kermit up, but Kermit nervously heads off when he comes face to face with a human. This is actually a really sweet scene. After Kermit heads off, the young boy kind of watches him like, and checks his mailbox, with the name Henson written on it. This is clearly a tribute to Jim Henson. And not just by using his name. I know from previous guests on Nostalgia Talk who have talked about Jim, whenever he would be thinking to himself, he would just go, And also when he offered to help Kermit up. Honestly, it sounds like something Jim would have done just from what I know about him. While Kermit, Croaker, and Pilgrim continue to chase the truck, Dr. Craftsman reports Pilgrim to a dog catcher, with Mary focusing more on how cute she was as the trio run past them. The group manages to escape into a movie theater, with Croaker enjoying the taste of popcorn, while Kermit is so intrigued that he aspires to be a movie star, but Croaker doesn't think Kermit will ever make it, as the trio walks by a younger Statler and Waldorf. But once outside, they realize how late it's getting, with Pilgrim pointing out how hard it'll be to find Wilson's truck after nightfall, just as Kermit comes across balloons by a toy store sign, using them to lift himself high enough to be able to spot the truck. But he becomes distracted by the view until he spots it, but is unable to get down until the balloons hit a water tower, lowering Kermit down to the back of the truck. Kermit finds a box and believes that Goggles is inside, but when he opens it, he gets startled by a monkey, causing him to fall out of the truck, while at the pet shop, Wilson gets a call from Dr. Craftsman, demanding frogs. Dr. Craftsman asks Wilson how many frogs he has, and as he counts them, Goggles assumes that he won't be chosen, but as it turns out, a dozen frogs and one toad are just what Dr. Craftsman needs. Is it just me, or does this make Dr. Craftsman seem extra evil? The room he's in is super dark, it looks kind of like a mad scientist lab, the music is super ominous, and the scene ends with him laughing maniacally. While on the trail with a squeaky toy in hand, Kermit reconnects with Croaker and Pilgrim, who delights in the squeaky toy. Kermit tells Croaker about finding the truck, but not finding Goggles and Blotch, as Pilgrim leads them to the pet store, while Goggles and Blotch are packed away for Dr. Craftsman. Kermit and Croaker make their way to the open side window, while Pilgrim enjoys chewing on a rawhide. Kermit tries to talk Croaker into hopping again, but Croaker still believes that the tire tracks have caused him to lose his hop, but Kermit encourages him to try. Croaker gets a running start and successfully makes it inside, with Pilgrim boosting Kermit up. But once inside the pet store, Vicky the Snake informs them that all of the frogs were taken away to George Washington, explaining that anyone who goes to George Washington never returns. Kermit feels that all hope is lost, but Croaker figures that they should just sleep on it, as Croaker literally falls asleep on a cat bed. Finally, Wilson delivers the frogs to Dr. Craftsman, relieved after previous concerns that, as he says to Wilson, he wouldn't get any frogs this year. Wilson tells him that he never has to worry about that with him, and Dr. Craftsman responds, "It's the frogs' turn to worry." I love when Wilson talks to Dr. Craftsman about how much he loved frogs when he was younger. Did anyone else at first think that Wilson was like a bad guy? Then you discover that he owns a pet store and it's like, oh, he's not so bad after all. Although this does show that Dr. Craftsman is a bit weirder than we thought. After Wilson leaves, he smells the box and describes it as victory, but Mary calls it pond scum. And there's also a bit of adding to Dr. Craftsman's character as we see behind him George Washington High School. So that's this George Washington everybody's been talking about. Goggles thinks that George Washington is Dr. Craftsman, who he believes is their new owner. So if you've never seen this special before, here's what I'd like you to do. I want you to think about frogs and high school. What do you think the connection is? At the pet store, Kermit notices the star that he saw earlier calling his name. At first he thinks that it's his mother, and speaking of, I wonder if his mother's worried about where her son is, but then the star tells him to follow his heart, believing in him finding his friends, and finishing its message by calling him Herman before correcting itself. Like Goggles did, who's Herman? The next morning after Wilson arrives at the pet shop, Kermit and Croaker hatch a little plan to find Goggles and Blotch. The pair go, ribbit, ribbit, in an attempt to get Wilson to take them to George Washington, making Wilson wonder to himself if he forgot a few frogs, bringing them with him to the school while Pilgrim follows behind. On the way, Kermit rubs two sticks together, and when Wilson carries the box inside, it starts to smoke. He tries to put it out as Kermit and Croaker escape just as the school bell sounds, with several students heading to their next class while Pilgrim shows up, warning Kermit and Croaker about what happens to frogs at a high school. Wilson attempts to find Kermit and Croaker while Kermit, Croaker, and Pilgrim try to find Goggles and Blotch through a montage of them going all around the school, and it quickly turns into Wilson trying to find Pilgrim as well. Kermit hiding in the boys' locker room. Yeah, he doesn't stay in there very long. I actually really like this high school. I see a poster on the auditorium door about yearbooks, and there's senior class photos, the trophy case with Croaker trying to hide there. Yeah, this just takes me back to when I was in high school. Finally, Wilson finds the trio, putting Pilgrim on a leash and bringing Croaker to biology class when the bell sounds once again. In a lot of these shows or movies that I've seen in a school setting, the sound of the school bell is just the bell ringing. This one's a buzzer. When I was in school, our school bells were also buzzers. Although ours usually sounded more like a video game character dying than this one does. In biology class, before teaching, Dr. Craftsman has a look at Goggles, stating that he wasn't planning to use toads at first, but feels as if Goggles is just what he needs. Goggles is flattered by this, but right away I'm like, yeah, this isn't a good thing, dude. Dr. Craftsman explains to his class that the lesson today is to find out what makes frogs tick by dissecting them, much to the disgust of his class. Quick question, when you guys were in high school, or if you're in high school now, did you ever do this? I never took biology when I was in high school, but I remember some of my friends did, and I do remember that frogs weren't the only things that were dissected. Mary explains how dissecting works. This is supposed to be for kids, right? This seems actually super morbid, even for the Muppets. Anyway, while she's explaining it, Goggles thinks that dissection is a full-body massage, but Blotch is a step ahead of the game. While trying to find Croaker, Goggles, and Blotch, Kermit overhears a girl on her way to biology, seemingly complaining that it's her least favorite class, while Kermit hangs onto her bag. With Mary's portion of the lesson completed, Dr. Craftsman prepares to take Goggles out of the box to show dissection to the class, but Blotch pushes him out of the way, going in his place just as Wilson shows up with Croaker, at first frightening Dr. Craftsman with Pilgrim. After Wilson and Pilgrim leave, Dr. Craftsman decides to use Croaker for the demonstration instead of Blotch, strapping him to the table saying, "This may hurt you more than it hurts me." Before he can get to dissecting, the student from before arrives unaware that Kermit is riding on her bag, and Dr. Craftsman has Mary do the dissection instead, but she hesitates and leaves, dropping her scalpel, but Kermit picks it up when Dr. Craftsman begins the demonstration. Goggles lifts Blotch up in an attempt to save Croaker, but Kermit beats him to it, using the scalpel he picked up off the floor to release Croaker as the class notices. Before Dr. Craftsman can begin, Kermit points the scalpel at him to fight him away, inspired by the movie he watched in the theater, as he and Dr. Craftsman fence with their scalpels. But Dr. Craftsman knocks Kermit's out of his hand and decides to use Kermit for his demonstration instead, but is bitten on the leg by Blotch and Croaker hops on his face, with Goggles and all of the other frogs escaping their box. Just then, Kermit shouts, "Stop!" much to the shock of Dr. Craftsman and the other students. Kermit stands up for himself and the other frogs, demanding to be released, with the students chanting with the frogs in agreement. Even Pilgrim joins in, with Mary and Wilson amazed that she can talk, as they join in as well. Finally, Dr. Craftsman breaks down and tells the class that this same thing happened to him when he was in biology class. Before he could dissect a frog, the frog, like Kermit, yelled, "Stop!" and he couldn't bring himself to dissect his frog, but wasn't able to prove that frogs are able to talk as the class taunts him, calling him a froggy pants. Now an adult, Craftsman is pleased to be able to prove that he is not a froggy pants. Croaker tells him, "You are a certifiable nutball." Overjoyed over not being a froggy pants, Dr. Craftsman dismisses his class and frees the frogs, while Wilson drives Kermit, Blotch, Croaker, and Goggles home to the swamp and brings Pilgrim home with him. Back in the present day, Kermit tells the viewer that he is still friends with Croaker, Blotch, Goggles, and Pilgrim as he says goodbye to the viewer and is welcomed back home. Okay, so there we go. That's the special Kermit's Swamp Ears. I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about it, and I hope you enjoyed the special if you've seen it. Now, while we have seen where Kermit has been after all these years, we haven't seen much of the other characters in the movie, with the exception of Statler and Waldorf, of course, and clearly they haven't changed. I think the only character who originated from this special that we've seen is Croaker, who made a background cameo in Muppets Most Wanted at Miss Piggy and Constantine's wedding, but he hasn't played a major role since. Anyway, thanks for listening, and happy 70th anniversary to our favorite frog, Kermit.